So whether you call them green jobs or not, I think that nomenclature will fade as it starts to permeate the economy. But I think anyone who puts their head in the sand and says these aren't real issues that are driving our economy is missing a bigger trend here.
So if I may, just to add to the comments here, when it comes down to the definition of green jobs, 2-3 years ago, when the whole green movement was such a big buzz through the community college system, and a lot of money was available through the federal government to support the training of folks to get into green jobs, we too were focusing on a lot of the emerging technologies like solar panels and things like that. And so a lot of the companies that we spoke to started to partner up with the community college system, and we wrote some very competitive proposals where about $9 or $10 million were secured from the Department of Labor for training. The problem was that we were going to be training for individual companies, and those companies happened to be replicated in a lot of the proposals and projects. So one company was in one proposal, and that same company was in another proposal. Both proposals were focusing on developing the technician. What happened later on, about 6 or 7 months later, was that the companies told us, you know, you've got a lot of people being trained for these technician jobs, but without the job orders, these people will not be able to go anywhere. And so we decided to try to change and help the industry by developing other types of job classification training, some of the sales, marketing, etc., and hopefully that would eventually lead to more job orders. Now, is that enough? I think when it comes down to just the solar side, if there's a lot of other regulatory issues, that's just a whole nother discussion which I'll defer to Dr. Husing. But I think when it comes down to the adoption of that technology, the customer's not going to be able to come to the table and put in their job order, and our training that results in a lot of people getting trained in technical areas will never have enough opportunity in front of them. So I think there was a mismatch in the expectation from the federal government and the community college system and a lot of other workforce development systems met and came to the table to put these projects into play, but the need is just simply not as much as we hoped for.
I agree. You know, what our company is doing is very specific in commercial use, and if we wanted to get into the retail market, we could probably create a lot more jobs because you get a lot more people buying your product. But it's something that, with our technology, is not easily adaptable to home use per se. Now, our technicians, most of them are former union plumbers. And the reason that is because there are no plumbing jobs out there. There are no new construction projects, big construction projects out there. Now, do we classify them because they came to work for us now as green jobs? You know, I don't think so. You know, our technology, yes, like John said, the technology that we have is creating green jobs, but those are our engineers and our scientists. They're not, and it's not a big force. I mean, we don't need 5,000 or even 100 engineers and scientists to do what we're doing, but we do need a couple of hundred technicians out in the field. So I don't like the definition of green, just because the market for it really isn't there. Solar panels, I mean, everybody saw what happened to Solyndra, and you know, when you think of green, you think of solar panels and biofuels, right? So what's the market for biofuels right now? It's not that big. What's the market for solar? I mean, it's such, the entry point, the price point is just so expensive for an individual homeowner or even a business. It's not realistic. I don't think that it's really going to grow at the pace that the government wants it to grow. Now, our company, we get calls from the mayor's office all the time. They love us because we're a green company and we're growing and creating jobs. We get calls from the county supervisor's offices and the governor's office. You know, we've been invited to go up to Sacramento to meet with some folks in the governor's office because we're a green emerging company. So we're fitting into into what they wanted to create these green jobs, but it's just not there. I don't see it getting there. I see our company growing, but green jobs.
So let's stay with Solyndra for just a moment, because I know that that's at the forefront of everybody's mind when they think of green jobs. And we know that within the state of California, we infused tax subsidies, about 100 million actually, that resulted in 650 jobs. 78 of them were at the now bankrupt Solyndra. And many of these companies actually had employees actually in other states because that's where their factories were located. And so there's been a lot of pushback about the notion of using state funds to create jobs that are very limited and in fact highly specialized and sometimes in other states. Those have been the arguments against continuing these types of subsidies and tax breaks. So if we could just focus on that for a moment, the notion of continuing that process. We'll start with Alex and go down this way.
Sure. So Solyndra gets a lot of attention just because they were the one investment that didn't work out. I think any investor, whether a venture capitalist or a stock trader, will tell you you invest in a portfolio of technologies or investments because you expect some of them to fail. So I think we have to keep that in perspective, that the federal government has put billions of dollars into new technology companies, and we had one rather colossal failure. It's not to say it'll be the only one. Similar program, so Solyndra was through the loan guarantee program. Similar program is actually granting grants to battery manufacturers to build the manufacturing infrastructure for electric vehicle batteries. One of the companies that received about $100 million from the federal government is called Enerdel. And I guess full disclosure there, we see them as kind of a competitor in that space. They're not doing so well. Their stock is down 90% in the last year. So is that going to be another Solyndra? Maybe. Does that mean that all of those investments are bad? No. Qualion was the beneficiary of a smaller award from the California Energy Commission, a $7 million award through the AB 118 program, which is designed to enhance California's clean vehicle program. And our award was targeted at manufacturing capacity. This will be automating our plant so that we can take a process that's largely handmade and scale it up with automation so that we can be more competitive with large companies overseas. That's really the only way for California manufacturers to be competitive, is to focus on higher value applications. It's less labor intensive, but that automated process enables many more jobs up and down the value chain. So I think it's wrong to categorically poo-poo any kind of government investment in technology because one or two companies fail. I think it's also important to keep in mind that the main reason why Solyndra failed is because the solar market is so robust. They face a lot of competition from China, and the Chinese government does subsidize their solar panel manufacturers. But the large demand is what's driving the growth in China, and that's why the price of solar panels is down so much, which makes it easier for homeowners to put them on their roofs. So Solyndra's collapse might actually signal a positive trend in the solar market for the rest of us. And so I think all those things are important to keep in mind before we just start pillorying the government for putting money into a company like Solyndra.
Well, since I had mentioned that there were a lot of projects funded through local, state, and federal levels to the community college system, we have quite a lot of resources, a lot of training dollars, a lot of wraparound services that's funded through these grants. Coming from a different angle to support a company, we would be very open to working with a company and defraying some of the, if not all of the training costs that company would have to burden if they wanted to increase, expand, enhance the skill base of their workforce. We currently have funds right now through the community college system, and we're looking for companies to basically spend the money on. It's that way, it's that new type of educational and training strategy that includes, on-the-job training and paid internships through our grant. That's what we want to try to offer to the employers now. That's something that we need to do more. If the funding is here, And if the funding is available through all these three layers, at the very top, federal government, all looking for new and innovative ways to educate and train, part of that new innovation is exposing that individual to the workforce on the dime of the grant. So I think to help a company, and we were talking earlier, to help a company out when they're growing and increasing, let's work together to try to leverage some of these resources that we currently have and can get more of to make sure that the workers are meeting your expectations.
Our technology, because it's so new and cutting edge, has been hampered actually a little by the federal government, because all the money that the federal government is issuing is going to solar companies and to biofuel companies, and what we have is so new and so cutting edge that our chief scientist sat on the national committee writing the protocol for the use of ozone in wastewater, small wastewater treatment facilities. And it took a little over a year to write this protocol. There was no federal protocol for it. So the federal protocol is now written, it's published, we have it, we have our systems designed, we have it manufactured, we're ready to go to market, spend all this money on it. What happens? Well, we need NSF, National Sanitation Foundation approval, which is an offshoot of the USDA. Anything that has to do with food or waste treatment has to have an NSF stamp on it. This glass, if it's used in a restaurant, has to have NSF. The copper piping in your home or in this building has to have an NSF stamp on it. So we're ready to go. Call NSF. We're ready to bring our system down to test for 30 continuous days. Well, we don't have water. We don't have power. We're only working 2 days a week. They're funded by the government, by the federal government. Finally, we get to go down there. This was last week. Our chief engineer went down to Waco, Texas, and of course Texas has had a pretty nasty drought. I flew into Houston a couple weeks ago and it looked like a desert out there. But so we get to Waco and they say to us, okay, now you have to help us set up the testing protocol. They don't have money for this. They say their budget's been slashed by tens and tens of millions of dollars, which hurts us creating these green jobs. And now we have to not only help them pay for this testing that that the federal government's supposed to pay for, but now we have to wait another month. So now we're going to get about 2 years after we were ready to go to market with our product, and we're being held back because the federal government is spending money on solar power and biofuels. But a real problem with a lot of communities is the water table. The water table is becoming contaminated. The birth defect rate in some areas is a little higher because of the water, all the chemicals getting into the water, a lot of for agricultural use because of all the pesticides. Ozone will get rid of pesticides. So we have the technology that can not only create jobs but really help people get healthier. And we're being hampered because there's no money in the federal budget to put our testing protocol together so we can take our products to the market.
But if I could jump in there, and that certainly is a problem with the role of regulation, but I don't think that's anything that's unique to green industries. That's something we see with the FDA testing medical devices and new drugs, and the FCC testing new telecommunication systems. So, I think that is probably
Well, I'll give you an example. I don't mean to cut you off, but
sure.
NSF, when we were down there, the place was in shambles. It was falling apart. I mean, they needed to paint the place at the very least. It was in bad shape. The gentleman who runs the facility was very apologetic. He said, it doesn't normally look like this, and we normally don't run our operation like this. An example, they used to put through about 150 different products for wastewater every year. Last year they did 10. And only one company got approved or certified. So, how do you explain that?
I'm going to go to John for a second, unless you want to jump in on the subsidies. I was just going to ask you, because you were actually speaking about the subsidies earlier and whether or not that was an appropriate course of action. And so in line with what we're just hearing from Alejandro and Alex with respect to regulation and potential hindrances, what are other ways, perhaps, then, that we could increase sustainability, that we could increase innovation outside of tax subsidies?
You were looking over my shoulder when I was making notes while they were talking. The whole policy area in this that affects this really fascinates me. I find 4 areas where policy is either 1, working, or 2, is badly needed and doesn't exist. Let me talk about each one of them in turn. I talked to 3 or 4 very large manufacturers who are being required to put in technologies and threatened with fines if they do not put them in, from a standpoint of clean air regulation through South Coast AQMD. So they put in this particular company goes to market, borrows several $1 million, invests it in the technology. 2 years later, AQMD comes back and said, we got a better technology, get rid of that one. Problem, they haven't paid for the last one yet. So now you're starting to layer debt for installation of technologies under the threat of fine. And this particular company's got $2 billion in the ground in California. They can't afford to leave, but they see their customers leaving, and that's really of concern to them because of that. So I asked this gentleman a question. I said, okay, you installed all this equipment. How much of it was made in California? And the answer was he could think of one thing, which was a minor expenditure of all the stuff he was being asked to buy. We have in the state requirements to install technology with absolutely no policies to try and see any of it get made here. And that is a huge policy lack. If we're going to spend money on cleaning up the environment, let's at least create jobs on the other side, creating the tools that clean up the environment. That's the first one. Badly need to figure out some way of doing that. Second thing, I did the analysis of the clean truck program at the ports of LA and Long Beach. One day I was asked to come in to talk to some people who had an LNG truck and they wanted it to be used to go through the gates. There's 16,800 trucks that heavily service the ports. And so I expected to go see a couple of people with long hair and ponytails and all the rest, and I walked in the room. Here's a personal representative of T-Bone Pickens, 3 guys from Peterbilt who happen to manufacture this particular kind of truck, and several other folks of that kind. And they were essentially saying, we want you to recommend to the ports a funding system that would allow LNG trucks to compete head-on with clean diesel because we think it's a better technology. So I looked at these 3 guys from Peterbilt and said, all right, what you're saying to me is you want us to make your national market for that type of truck. And they said, yes, we do. And I said, fine, would you build them in California? And the answer was absolutely no. We will build them in Seattle. We will not build them in California. We are not going under the craziness of your regulatory system down here. Now, there again is something we would like to have, but we are in fact barring it from being done here because on the one hand we want something, on the other hand the production of it isn't being taken care of. Third example really is a problem with the federal government. There is in the city of Palm Desert out in the Coachella Valley, they began using redevelopment funds and then other money out of their general fund to allow homeowners to buy solar, also businesses to buy solar on their roofs and have it put onto their tax bill and as a lien, and it would run with the property no matter who owned it. And Berkeley started taking a look at this, several other cities did, and what happened was Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA said no way in hell, because that would become a superior lien to us, and we're not about to allow that to happen. So it just basically shut down an incredible potential market, because what it would basically say is you buy the equipment, you put a lien against the property, runs for 20, 30 years, it's a minor expense that's on your property tax bill, and you've got solar going on roofs all over the place. Couldn't do it. The area that's working seems to be the policy on the solar field again, and that is, there was the headline today in the papers where they've identified large areas where they want to really allow sped up location of solar technology for large solar development as opposed to rooftop types of things, in order to start to move us ahead and get more and more of us off of the grid. That's one that seems to be working. The problem in the state that we have, however, if you go back to our legacy industries, is our policies on mandating the use of certain technologies is essentially raising electrical costs in California to the point that legacy industries are paying double any competitor state for their electrical power. And that, of course, has competitive implications for California's ability to grow.
Cheeto, I want to ask you the same question, but coming from an educational perspective in terms of increasing innovation and productivity in the sustainability field.
Sure. The simple fact for us is that community colleges are reactionary. You know, we try to bend with the wind according to what the trends are in business and industry. So for us, for the community college district, and I'm going to speak with for LACCD, we're trying to increase our relationships with business and industry. So no matter which way it turns, we should be able to be adaptive enough to meet that need. What goes with us, however, is a close connection with the funding sources, whether it be local, state, and federal resources. We get the fact that workers work within the community, corporations. It's those individuals that have to be reskilled on some contacts, and other times new employees will have to be found. Either way, the community college system has to be more adaptive. And it's better to be adaptive when you have funding sources to go along with you. So what we try to do is come to the table with a company and say, look, we have this funding right now. We'd love to help you increase your effectiveness in your workforce. Sometimes, most of the time, we can probably defray wages and training costs. It's that type of closer connectivity with business and industry that the community college system can support whatever changes happen. And if it trickles down from the regulatory levels, it doesn't matter, because we're going to have to change with you, alongside you.
And I wanted to follow up on another comment as well, thank you, Cheeto, from Alejandro regarding water. We have a lot of focus, and even today we're seeing a lot of focus on energy and technology as well. But water, of course, is one of, if not the most critical concerns facing particularly Southern California. And so how do you see that, the notion of water efficiencies and the prioritization of that within the sustainability realm, green jobs in particular, impacting businesses? Alex, do you have any thoughts on that?
So speaking to this point, it'll be more from my experience. Previous to this job, I worked for the mayor of Los Angeles and for a city council member on a lot of water conservation issues. And LA is in a unique position with 4 or 5 regions around the country to really take advantage of our water shortage and